Many years ago, I read a book that turned everything I knew about leadership upside down. For the longest time, I didn't realize that leadership is something you can improve. Like so many people, I thought leadership was just something you're born with. I realize now how ridiculous that is. Leadership can be learned, it can be practiced, it can be improved. There are actually research-backed elements that have been proven to enhance leadership effectiveness. And because these elements can be learned and improved, I think it's appropriate to call them skills. If you learn these leadership skills, you become a better leader. Now, the book I'm referring to that made all this click for me is an old book by Jim Collins and Bill Leisure called Beyond Entrepreneurship. And it was originally written nearly 3.5 decades ago, which is crazy. But Collins released an updated version called B 2.0 back in 2020. The updated version revealed just how solid the research really was. This one really stood the test of time. Now, I want to say on the front end that today's episode is inspired by this leadership book. It's a classic. And this book, among others, has helped me go from zero to leading a team of over 60 staff and volunteers, serving thousands of people each week. And so obviously, I highly recommend it. It should be an annual read for anyone in leadership. If you want a list of great leadership books like this one, I encourage you to download my free leadership resource list, which you can find in the description below. All right, let's talk about 7 skills that great leaders have. No time to waste. Here's the first one. Skill number 1 is authenticity. This skill is all about what's within you as the leader and how that influences people around you. Do you genuinely believe in what you're doing? Effective leadership has less to do with what you say and much more to do with what you model. The joke that you've probably heard, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, that shouldn't be funny to a leader, right? Because it's toxic and it's the opposite of great leadership. Words must be followed with actions. Now, I wish that was easy to do. For whatever reason, it's actually pretty difficult. But here's the thing, if you as the leader authentically believe in and internalize the mission, the vision, the values, you will, I'm telling you, you will successfully model them within the culture you're responsible for leading. It's just how it works. Unfortunately, you just can't fake authenticity. You either really do believe in the cause that you're serving or you don't. And people are going to know. If you don't believe in what you're doing, how could you possibly lead others to believe in it? Becoming a more authentic leader really comes down to whether or not you believe in the work that you do. If you don't, well, you need to go to work on purpose right away. For instance, if you're in finance, your purpose shouldn't be to make more money. It could be something like fighting poverty. If you're a coach, your purpose shouldn't be winning. It could be something like helping young players realize their full potential. You know, as the leader, you need to have the purpose deep inside you. This is the only way you can lead authentically. Let me know in the comments what your purpose is. Like, what makes you able to lead authentically? By sharing your purpose, maybe you'll help someone else in your field discover their own purpose. All right, skill number 2, decisiveness. Indecision is one of the great enemies of great leadership. When it comes to decision making, a lot of leaders wait around for the perfect amount of information. And this can easily become a type of defense mechanism for people who are risk averse. We tend to think the more information, the less risk. The problem is, you're never going to have perfect information. You'll be waiting forever for that kind of forecast. So this eventually turns into procrastination, or it turns into analysis of the paralysis. Leaders can't forget that the objective is not to have all the information. It's not to do analytics. The ultimate objective is to make a decision. The best leaders learn how to do this really well. They don't neglect the process of gathering information, and they don't neglect conducting analytics, obviously. They just know when they've done enough to make a decision. And that is a skill. How do great leaders do this? Well, they use intuition. In other words, they make a gut decision. Now, I know that makes many of you squirm a little bit, but this is a skill you need to develop. It's important to remember that a wrong decision is often better than no decision at all. You're not going to have a 100% record on good decisions. You know, it reminds me of a quote by Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Or was that Michael Scott? I can't remember. In any case, it's true. And you also don't have the opportunity to learn from the misses if you never shoot, which is a critical part of making decisions. You learn from the failures. Great leaders are decisive. Okay, skill number 3 is focus. Peter Drucker said, do first things first and second things not at all. The alternative is to get nothing done. And there's a lot of truth to that. The greater the focus, the greater the intensity. Unfocused light might illuminate a room, but focus that same light and it can become a laser that cuts through metal. Now, focus can apply to a number of things. It can apply to time management, mental clarity, distraction mitigation, priority setting, so much more. In a world of distractions, we have to fight really hard to stay focused. I can't remember where I first heard this, but I remember one leader saying that we don't need more to-do lists. We need more to don't lists. Okay, skill 4 is personal connection. This skill is about being a hands-on leader. Great leaders aren't detached, they aren't removed, they aren't distant or uninvolved. Great leaders create a culture of great relationships and personal connections. Some people refer to this whole principle or skill as MBWA, which stands for management by walking around. And, there's some good to that, right? But personally, I actually don't like that phrase. I think it misses the entire point of the personal connection. If you're walking around with the intent to manage, then you're looking around for things to manage. And consequently, your team will feel managed. I think a better approach would be CBWA, connecting by walking around. In other words, if you want to build meaningful relationships, then emphasize connection, not management. If you're walking around with the intent to connect, then you're seeing relational opportunities, not management opportunities. And consequently, your team will feel connected to you rather than managed by you. And it also still gives the leader opportunities to make strategic personal corrections as needed, which would obviously fall into more of the management camp. Collins tells a great story of Debbie Fields, founder of Mrs. Fields Cookies. And apparently she had a habit of showing up at her stores unannounced. And on one occasion, she noticed what she called a very unhappy looking batch of cookies laid out for her customers. And she asked the young man behind the counter what he thought of the cookies. And he said, they're good enough. She nodded and proceeded to gently take the trays one by one, emptying nearly $600 worth of cookies into the trash can. She said to him, good enough never is. Now, I bet that young man never forgot that interaction he had with Debbie Fields that day. She took a personal connection and she used it to deliver a very powerful correction. It was gentle, yet impactful. Skill number 5, hard and soft people skills. Great leaders have incredibly high standards. That's the hard. And yet they build people up to meet those standards. That's the soft. A lot of this is done through positive feedback, not as a critic or a boss, but as a mentor or a teacher. Great leaders recognize that the bar of excellence can never be compromised. However, people will inevitably miss the bar. And so what do these great leaders do with that? Well, they don't lower the bar. Instead, they help individuals rise to it. Now, this does 2 things. First, it builds a culture of trust in which team members feel safe to fail without fear of being let go. Second, it builds a culture of improvement. If the leader is willing to walk them through what it takes to rise to the bar, that sends a very powerful message. Okay, skill number 6 is communication. Great leaders understand the importance of stimulating constant communication. Communication should be humming in all directions at all levels. The number one thing that a great leader communicates is vision and strategy. The best leaders err on the side of too much communication rather than too little. And look, if we aren't sick of communicating the mission, vision, and values, then clearly we're not doing it enough. There are a lot of ways for a leader to communicate, and there are endless ways to improve our communication skills. The best leaders are constantly trying to improve their communication skills. In so many ways, this is where the leader earns their keep. Okay, here's the last skill. Skill number 7, ever forward. Great leaders have an ever forward mentality, meaning that they are constantly growing. They're never complacent. This growth mindset influences the culture, influences everyone around them. Collins writes that the moment you cease to be excited and energetic about your work is the moment you will simultaneously cease to be effective as a leader. Now, that sounds pretty cutthroat, but it's true. Related to the ever forward mindset is the need for optimism and tenacity. Great leaders don't let obstacles deter them from persistently pressing onward. Now, look, I understand this was obviously a gross summary of some very important leadership skills. If you're itching to go even deeper, I encourage you to download that free leadership resource list I mentioned before. It has resources in every category we discussed today. And as always, keep fighting the good fight. And hey, if you found this episode valuable, I think you'll enjoy this episode right here where we discuss the difference between leadership skills and management skills. It offers some really great insights that I think you'll find valuable in your own leadership journey. I'll see you over there.